48-hour art check, round 69.
All right.
So normally this is where we make a comment on the number, and I think we can just move forward.
Yeah, we'll let that one pass.
All right, sounds good. So, yeah, if you guys are watching this, go ahead and share it so we can get some people in the chat. And if you haven't yet, hit that like button. And that's kind of flashing, kind of weird. But so today, for the topic, I was thinking of, it's been something that I've been thinking of a little bit because I've watched some students over the past couple of weeks, and I've actually made a video or two on this recently because of this, but I've watched some students over the last couple of weeks really struggle to have initiative when there isn't clear instructions. And so in any situation, you take a 20-something-year-old and you give them a situation where it's like, here's the step-by-step clear process. They're very used to doing that. But if you say, here's this big far-off goal that's way out there, and you're here, figure out what you're going to do and go do it. They usually freeze. It's very seldom in my experience that they don't freeze. And so I thought that might be kind of an interesting topic because most of the people that are our age that have been creating for a little while or longer have gotten to the point where that feels more like an opportunity than an obstacle, because if that happens to me, I go, okay, great, let's figure this out. And you just kind of sit down and you just kind of like blaze your trail, like whatever the trail is. If you're trying to get higher, you build the ladder. You don't look for the ladder. You just build it out of whatever you've got. You screw it up a little bit here. You take pieces of what you screwed up and you use that to kind of build more rungs. And like, you just kind of build it as you go. Whereas that seems to be a really, really difficult process to get to with, I think experience has a lot to do with it, and I'm not exactly sure why, and I'm not sure if youth has something to do with it or not, but it seems like those two things are like one of the main consistent factors in people who just really struggle taking initiative in the face of ambiguity.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I do think that is one of those cases where I think our education system is a little bit to blame, because I think that there's a lot of rote learning that's taught like early on in schools, where it's like it's like all classes, including the humanities, are taught at a level that's like a basic math class, where it's like you just kind of memorize the equations and you memorize the answers. Or the best example I can think of is like an art history class, which I don't know if they've ever really changed the formats, where a lot of it's just like memorizing dates and names. And, you know, the better art history teachers you have will kind of focus on like concepts and broader themes and movements that were happening historically at the time when the art was created. Yeah. Because those are kind of the things that actually matter a little more than like in 1633, you know?
Yeah.
But I do think rote learning kind of damages people a lot. And I did notice that teaching, I've mentioned this before, but there were a couple teachers I taught with that would teach kind of akin to like, you know, what you could get just watching like video tutorials. And that was it. That was the extent of the courses. And so when I started teaching at the school I was teaching at, students would have a little bit of difficulty because I wouldn't give them the step-by-step.
Right.
I would kind of review the tools, what they do, how to use them, what the shortcuts are. And then I would be like, okay, let's make this thing. And they'd be like, well, how do I do that? And it's like, well, you've got the tools, you know, and I'd kind of guide them along the way. So while they were exploring, they could like learn the right questions to ask.
Yeah.
And I do think it freaks people out because people are conditioned. I mean, this is my own theory, but I think people in the U.S. are very conditioned to kind of blindly follow authority because it's the authority, to kind of do the steps, the 10 steps to success, or the 5. I mean, you look at our culture and it's like that with books. Like are if you look at like the best-selling, motivational books, they're always like the 5 steps to success, like the 4 steps. Like everybody wants like really clearly spelled out steps, and I think so I think it's partially our schooling system. I don't know if you agree with that.
No, I do. I think we built our education system. Our current education system is built, and I've done whole videos and lectures and stuff on this. So I'll just go over it in like 2 seconds. But the current education system is really built on needing robots, but not being able to build robots. And so like we needed factory workers that could do stuff over and over and over again. And so what we did is we taught people how to be robotic, and that has stuck. And so we actually teach people that if you do exactly what you're told and follow the instructions and press all the right buttons and pull all the right levers in the right order, that you're going to be successful. But that's not the case. So here's my question, because this is the part. Sorry, go ahead.
Would you say that maybe people should do things that robots can't?
I do say that. I almost wish I had like a screen graphic or something that I could pull up. But yeah, people should do things that robots can't.
Mm-hmm. They should even get a T-shirt that says that on Cory's site. Anyhow, so
here's my question. So this is what I've been trying to figure out. I'm trying to figure out, like, a lot of people that we know, and a lot of people that are frankly watching this video are the type of people who, in the face of unclear instructions, they write their own instructions. In the face of no clear path, they blaze one. In the face of like an obstacle, they get out their chisel and they carve a set of stairs into the obstacle and just climb over it. What I'm curious about, and this is selfish, but as a teacher, I want to know what it is that does that, right? What are the steps that you take to be able to identify how to move forward when there's no clear path forward? Because what I would like to do is I would like to be able to teach students who don't know how to do this, like, listen, here's what you need to do, rather than just, I don't think this is good advice, just like, well, just buckle down and do it, just pull yourself up by the bootstraps and just get to, nose to the grindstone. Because I don't think it's only effort. I think there's kind of a thought process that goes along with it. So, and I haven't really been able to like figure out how to teach, how to close that gap. I know how to do it, but I haven't processed it enough to be able to explain it out loud. Do you have any thoughts on like what it is that makes it so that some people can just move forward when there's no clear instructions and other people freeze?
Well, I mean, I think there's there's a couple things. Like I was saying about rote learning, that's one. I think another is that I think that it's a much easier task if you know every step of the process. It's a much easier task. It requires a lot less intense thought, and there's less risk of failure, because if you follow step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and you follow it and it's rote learning, it's like you could hardly fail as long as you follow the steps.
And if you do fail, it's the fault of the instructions and not your fault.
Exactly. And or maybe it's your fault for not clearly following the instructions. You know what I mean? But it's less of a risk. Like it's easier to identify success, it's easier to identify failure, it's easier to identify kind of a clear path forward. I also think it's very restrictive. And so this is where I'm with you on, like, I think it's great, the idea of kind of teaching it. I'm not sure if you can teach that. I think the best method of teaching towards like creative problem solving, where you're kind of having to think outside of the box, where you're thinking about a target and then you're kind of like reverse engineering your way back. Like, because I do think that's where it starts from, is having a clear objective. I think is very important, whether it's your own personal project or not, just having some sense of objective, some, like, you get in your car, you have an idea of which restaurant you want to go to.
See, I'm the type of person who gets in the car and drives to the part of town that has the most restaurants because I haven't decided yet. And then I just kind of like snake through town until something looks good. And I'm realizing that's actually how I do my projects as well, is I don't have a clear plan of how to do it, but I'm just like, well, I'm going to jump in and start drawing a page and let's figure this thing out as we go. I don't know what I'm doing. And so I wonder.
But I think that's a method, and I think even there, just having an idea of a part of town where there are a lot of restaurants, is a nice objective. Just, and you have an objective to get there.
That's why I got on Twitter. I mean, I got on Twitter because I was like, oh, there's a lot of comic book illustrators and writers on Twitter, and I don't know anything about anything, and so I'm just gonna like go start talking to people. And so I just got on Twitter and started saying, hey, so what are you doing? let me like eavesdrop on this conversation you're having and see what I can glean from it and whatnot.
Yeah. So what I think the common thread is that I think a lot of people who are making things, by nature are doing those things. So, and most of the people who follow our channel or are in our social media circles are makers.
Yeah.
And makers don't tend to be, in my experience, the type of people who wait for the path to be clearly paved. Most professional artists I know, like, if you waited, the time I got into the industry, there weren't like a lot of like YouTube how to get into the industry kind of things. Right. We were just hungry. We had the objective of like getting paid work, and then we just tried everything, like anything that we could to try to kind of break through and get like a little crack in that wall that's like preventing us from getting work. And I think that's a common thread with like people who start their own businesses, with people who do things that aren't preset. And it's a hard thing to know whether it's teachable or not, because it is one of those things where when I was teaching, the method of teaching I would do, there would be occasionally some kids that they were just hungry. And it's like they came in hungry, and that hunger would drive their curiosity to kind of find solutions and find the path and ask the right questions and stuff like that. So the method I'd take to try to kind of bring that out on kids, and I'm not good at it, I'm not perfect at it, but I always tried to be kind of Socratic, because I think a lot of how you teach that kind of thinking is you don't deliver answers easily. Instead, you give the right questions that will kind of lead the students to kind of discover the answer. Even if you're maybe asking some pretty obvious questions and you know exactly what's going to solve it, they're going to retain it, and they're also going to start creating more pathways to kind of get to their objectives if they're not being just force-fed or spoon-fed answers. And I think that's one of the problems, once again, with the way that we're raised and the way that society is. I think that it would be good for us to kind of encourage more questions, more like, why don't you solve it kind of things.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's really the best answer, but I do think that kind of leads to a more creative and conducive environment for people to like start to kind of problem solve.
Yeah.
But I would say most of it comes with just a few things. I'd say one is the question of like, well, how? Like, so you have like, you come up with an objective. Maybe it's a loose objective. Like, I need to get to a part of town that has a lot of restaurants, Yeah. And then I'll pick while I'm there. So how do I get there? Like, that's a good start. Is like, how am I going to get to that part of town with the restaurants? And then, what tools do I need to get there? And then also more important questions, along the way, like, are there simpler ways to get there? Are there simpler paths to arrival? Is it worth going there? Like, there's a lot of questions that I think are really vital that can kind of guide you along the way. And then, of course, being really humble enough to ask questions, which is huge.
Yeah.
Because I do think pride can actually prevent people from kind of going into that mode of thinking that's more the creative problem-solving method of thinking, instead of the rote learning where you're just waiting for,
somebody to just give you the answer. But there's kind of, on the one hand, there's pride, and on the other hand, there's fear. And it's almost like you need a portion of pride and fear, but you don't need a full portion. Like, you don't need a full serving of either one, because then it becomes problematic. But if you sit in the middle of that, and you're scared enough to know that you lack something, and so that kind of knocks down the pride enough, but you are confident enough in your abilities that you know that you can get it done, you just don't know how yet. Somewhere in the middle between pride and fear is kind of that sweet spot where you can move forward. I know this, and I think this is what I'm looking for. We're over time, so we can wrap this up and maybe carry this on in another discussion. But if I'm writing the class, if I've written the class, I know that I can get people to do it, because the trick is I just set exceptionally high expectations. I show them examples over and over and over again. This is how it can be done. These are students that have done it in the past, so that they can relate to the people accomplishing it. And then I set super high expectations, and I just tell them, it's on you. It's completely on you. And those high expectations plus examples of success almost always equals them just working super hard. And it's a really interesting concept, because I teach one class that is like this. And they just finished this project where they're doing a photorealistic illustration in Illustrator of a watch, and it's amazing what they can do, because they, like, 3 weeks ago had never touched Illustrator before, and then they have a couple weeks of training, and then they jump in and immediately start doing this fairly difficult thing, and it's just because they can see that it's possible. They know that the expectations are super high, so they're going to have to work hard because they don't know what they're doing. And almost all of them, they put in, like, in 2 weeks, they put in like 25 to 30 hours in this project, and get it done. You know, there's always a couple that don't, but so I know if you can structure the action, the actual application of that work, that it works. And I know that formula works. It's just, you know that you can do it. You're not sure how yet, but you know that with enough effort you can kind of move in that direction if you know where to find answers and things like that. The problem that I have is if it's just a conversation I'm having, I don't know what to tell someone. And now that I'm saying this out loud, I don't think there are magic words. I think there's just directed action. You figure out the best direction to go, and you go that way until it doesn't work, and then go a different way.
Yeah, and I think I think the reason that a lot of teachers kind of go with the step one, do this, step two, do this, that kind of method of teaching is that it's a lot more black and white, and the result is a lot more black and white. So it's safer to teach too, and the risk is a lot less when you teach it, because you're not going to have students asking like some really weird questions that make you have to think. And what I discovered by teaching kind of more Socratically was that I would learn a lot more in that way, as well as the students, because they would come with curveball questions that I didn't know the answer to.
Right.
And because they would try to achieve an objective I wouldn't have even thought to achieve in it.
Yeah.
In this, like, whatever the assignment was. And so to me, that's kind of the fun of it too, is the fact that it's more surprising, and self-directed work, self-motivated work is always, I think, going to be more authentic. And I think that's the kind of work that people will work like 20 hours. A student will work 25 hours on. Right. Whereas I think if you do the step one, do this, step two, you'll have the 1 or 2 A students that work 20 plus hours on everything. Work on it, but the majority of the class will phone it in, do the steps, get the grade, and move on. And so it's one of those things of it's a fascinating idea, and I'm not quite sure, because thinking about myself, I'm not quite sure what drives me to do that. But I've always, like, most of my life, have been the type of person who, when I start hearing step one, do this, step two, do this, I want to, like, rip apart the paper. I want to, like, overthrow the system. And but when I'm giving the opportunity of like, hey, we need this solution, um, how do we get there? Like that to me is way more engaging and interesting, and can kind of send me down rabbit holes sometimes. I mean, it's great. So I
Yeah.
think it's a weird topic, and it's a weird thing to discuss because it's not black and white. And I think, like a lot of things, really worth pursuing. The path gets a little muddier. To me, that's a lot more interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's so important to build those skills. It's good that you're doing that with your students, because without that skill, to be able to have ambiguous direction and kind of succeed at achieving a goal, I think without that ability, you're going to have a hard pressed time getting into art. Because I think if you watch a bunch of YouTube videos and you watch kind of like somebody's path to success and you reverse engineer it and you just follow it as if it's a handbook, you might be very sorely disappointed, because the path isn't always the same for everyone. And so I think you need a little bit of the ability to kind of think on your feet, kind of self-correct, to kind of catch yourself and be like, okay, well, this worked for so-and-so, but it's not working for me. Or finding quicker ways.
Yeah.
Like, it took this long to do this, but I could do this and it would be twice as quick. It's just one of those things. Like, I think it's an essential skill to build. And I guess what I'm saying it's hard is, like, I'm trying to think if for myself, like, if that was something that was taught, or if that was something that's just been kind of ingrained in me and my personality, because I like solving problems. I think that's part of why I love design and love illustration, because it's like, and particularly comics, because if you can think of anything in art that's one of the hardest puzzles to solve, I think it's cartooning.
Yeah.
Because it's just endless. It's like
Right.
a Pandora's box of just possibility. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's put a pin in this, because I think we could talk
Yes.
about a number of things in future episodes. Daniel Pink has an interesting book on motivation, talking about autonomy and why that's important. And there's a couple books that I've read about creating innovators, where like how you're raised and how you raise your children has a lot to do with it. There's almost a direct one-to-one correlation between people that are creative and Legos as kids is kind of an interesting thing in this one book I read. So let's touch on that, I think, in future episodes. I think that'll be. I'll pull out some of those books and refresh my memory on some of those things.
Yeah, that sounds lovely. And it's funny because that already generates a lot of interest for me, because I'm like, there's some things my parents did that did encourage that type of thinking that we could talk about. So,
yeah, I think maybe next time we meet, we could talk about things that parents do or things that our parents did to drive creativity. Because there's definitely ways that you can kill it, but I don't think enough people talk about what you can do to drive it.
Agreed. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So what did you get done in the last 48 hours?
So I did exactly what I was predicting, and I finished the tight pencils for the first 3 panels. So you'll notice like these magenta lines, and what I'm doing is going over my cyan lines and cleaning them up. When you notice one like that top right panel, and it's just all magenta, that means that I had to correct the blue line so much that I had to just delete the blue line.
All right.
So that's pretty much what you're looking at, and yeah.
That's cool. I'm excited to see the Velcro. I'm assuming that's a Trapper Keeper there in the upper right-hand corner?
Yes, indeed.
All right. I'm excited to see how you ink the Velcro. That'll be fun to see. So with me, let's see if we can get that turned on. I inked all the characters I said I was going to ink, and I'm almost done with inking the last one. So there's Ghost Rider as Spider-Gwen, Dot from Animaniacs as Lady Killer, and so I got those 2 in, and then I'm like halfway through doing Harley Quinn as Velma, and that will be the 31st and final character in this thing. And so then I've just got to finish the background. So I'll knock Velma out tonight, and then the background, and then I will be done with the inks in this thing, which I'm excited about.
Man, what a beast of a project!
Right.
That's cool.
So yeah. So how about challenges?
Okay, so my challenges were basically like this weekend. I actually was smart, and I stayed home and I did the freelance that I needed to do. Stayed up with my comic, but other than that, I just kind of rested, and so I feel like I'm like 98% healthy now. So I'm
Oh, good.
hoping that by tomorrow, this whole like throat thing will be gone.
Yeah, that's awesome. Um, for me, my challenge, I'm going to pull this back up. I don't do a lot of superhero drawing, and so it was kind of a challenge of technique. I started having to research like how people do things. I think I overdid it on her legs as far as the shading there, so I'm probably going to white a lot of that out. But yeah, a lot of the challenge that I had was just trying to figure out how I'm going to make this look kind of like superhero-ish. And so I looked at like a lot of Todd McFarlane stuff. I had some kind of art of books and things like that I've been some artist editions. So a lot of the challenge is actually just the art and the technique. So I'm still trying to figure it out. So
No, that makes perfect sense.
yeah. So what are your plans?
All right, so I am hoping to finish the tight pencils by next time. So there's a last panel that's like a crowd scene under these.
Mm-hmm.
That might make that complicated, but I think that if I can finish that fourth panel tonight after we finish recording, it might actually be a possibility. So I'm just going to say it and say I'm going to try to have the pencils finished by next art check, hopefully.
Cool. And I am going to finish inking Harley Velma and get the backgrounds done. So I'll have the inks completed on this before we meet on Wednesday. The background is going to take a little while, but I'm pretty sure I can do that. That's been my plan all along, is to knock it out before the end of the month. So I'll do that, and then I'm trying to decide whether I'm going to send it to a flatter, which is likely, or if I'm going to flat it myself. But I'll begin coloring it after Wednesday. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Yeah, I think it'll be good. So.
Well, it's looking rad. The more characters you add to that thing, the better it looks.
Well, thanks. Yeah, it's been a fun one to do. We got a call out to Nick Bernstein. Am I saying his name right, or his last name right? I can't remember. But Nick, he's a viewer of the show, and we were talking about some problems that we had, and I find this skill set to be so incredibly amazing that people can do this, that it's like magic to me. But he went out of his way to just make this thing that creates podcasts out of videos, and we gave him like some features and stuff, and he was like, yeah, I don't know how to do that, but I'll figure it out. And then he came back and is like, it does this thing. It's amazing to me that somebody can just write a piece of software. And so anyway, it's super cool that he was doing that, and it's really awesome. So I'll test that out after I get this page completely inked, and like there's a few things I've got to install and some kind of steps I've got to go through. But really cool, because if it works, which I expect it will, it'll be a gigantic time saver on this whole process. Almost, not quite, but almost automating, turning the videos into podcast episodes, which is amazing. It's just incredible.
Yeah, it's cool, and it's fun to think that our community is that tight knit to kind of like just randomly like dedicate a lunch to kind of helping us out, and
right.
Just kind of playing around and making something we were just kind of spitballing a couple days ago like a reality. It's very right. Cool and like super encouraging. And I know Scott, Cory, and myself were just all geeking out about it, because it's just kind of like, it's the ultimate cool thing that you can do for like, I guess, content creators you like is just like contribute something like that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So my mind is blown. Plus, I have no idea how to do coding, and just even watching the video of this thing, I'm like, ooh, can I do this? I don't know if I can do this, but I'm kind of fascinated, and I'm looking forward to kind of dipping in and seeing what we can do.
Yeah.
Should we mention the kind of the podcasts, even though it's kind of still in the works?
Yeah. So, let's do that. Actually, I should have done that at the beginning.
Yeah.
I'm still working out some of the bugs, but the several episodes of the podcast are live on iTunes now. I haven't submitted to other networks, but if one thing that's super important is in the early stages of podcasts, if they get reviews and listens, then it starts helping them rise in the ranks. And so, even if you guys have watched these videos, just go on there and like download it, subscribe, turn the episode on, even if you just like leave your phone in the bathroom while you go make yourself a sandwich or something. The more listens that we can get on those early on, the better. And then the more reviews that we can get, the better. What that'll do is not just help us, but it'll help the community, because our plan is to kind of like build this as kind of a creator community of people supporting each other and doing this. And if we can start ranking highly on our podcast, we're potential to reach a huge audience of people is there. And so any help that you guys could give us with one, spreading the word and sharing that podcast link, two, leaving a review on the podcast so that iTunes knows that there are people that like it, and then three, subscribing and listening to a few of those episodes. Super helpful. Yeah. If you could do those three things, that would be really, really awesome.
Yep, agreed. And it's cool that we're on iTunes, because I think it's a convenient way that you can kind of like download stuff, check it out on your commute to work and stuff like that. So
yeah, and that's kind of the intention. Is YouTube is great, and we love YouTube, and we'll continue to be on YouTube for as long as YouTube lets us be on here. But YouTube is not as portable as a podcast is. And so that's why I think it has the potential to reach a greater number of people. And we've had people on this show ask us if we're going to do audio. And that's actually one of the main reasons that we started kind of looking into this, is people in the chats were like, hey, are you guys considering putting this into an audio format? I know that was a super long time ago, because it was like within the first few episodes that somebody asked that. But we're just kind of ramping up. So anyway, now that we have this, I'm just trying to work out some of the bugs to get the episodes to update with iTunes without me having to do anything. And it should be working, and it's not. But there are 3 episodes up right now. And
5, I think.
Are there 5?
I'm seeing 5.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good. Fantastic. Okay, so
4. Never mind, 4.
Yeah, because there's 4 that 5 confused me, because there's only 4 that I've done.
Okay.
But
all 4 are up.
Okay, if 4 are up, then it's updating, and so I will get this episode up tonight, and so there should be a 5th one whenever iTunes decides to do it. But anything that you guys could do to share, leave a comment, or listen to those would just be awesome, because any of those metrics or all of those metrics are super, super helpful. Doesn't cost you a dime, and it is like one of the best things that can happen. And we'll read reviews on the air. So
agreed. And I can also say this, just having done a podcast before too. If you guys do those like 5-star rankings, you never know. Like, it doesn't take a ton of those for us to actually get in like the top rankings for like podcasts and stuff. So if you guys want to help us out, make that happen, make a little army happen, I think it's worth it. And like, for me, I'm excited because that's how I consume most content on my way to work. So like, for me, just being able to subscribe to that, subscribing to more podcasts, and being able to like just have it auto update on my phone so I can download it before I go to work, listen to it in the car. It's just ideal. So should we close out?
Yeah. Why don't you call us out?
Okay. So you can find my work at quarterlystories.com. You can also go to topis.io and search for Quarterly Stories and add it to your library there. You can find Cory's work, including the aforementioned t-shirt, at CoryKerr.com. And you should do things that robots can't. It's a really cool design. Intro music is by my band No Saboteurs, facebook.com/No Saboteurs. We should be playing a show fairly soon, so I'll announce that when that comes up. And that'll pretty much do it. So thanks, guys.
Okay, we'll see you.